I'm Jeremy Rosenthal, and you have tuned in to The Lawyer Show. The Lawyer Show is on JP, Kathy, and the Crew Network, and we talk about lawyer stuff. This is your opportunity to watch some good lawyer talk, some good water cooler talk, things that we talk about, and all things associated with that. So, anyway, thank you for watching. I am your lawyer, Jeremy Rosenthal, and today we have a very, very special guest as compared to other weeks when we have just a very special guest. Today, my guest is a lawyer by the name of Edward Andrew, quote unquote, Bo Kalabus. Bo Kalabus and I have known each other for probably about 30 years. We practice in the same office. We've practiced together now for 10 years. Bo, like myself, does exclusively criminal defense work. And Bo has got a long history. We met each other at New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico. And so anyway, Bo and I are just going to be kind of cutting things up today and dicing this thing apart, and then, you know, mashing it up and maybe snorting it a little bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and introduce Bo Kalabus. Bo, take it away. Introduce yourself to JP, Kathy, and the Crew Nation.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and our esteemed viewers here. We're happy that you tuned in and decided to join us for this hour here. And Jeremy, thank you so much. It's quite an honor to be on your show today, and congratulations on the new podcast.
Thank you, Bo. And you're correct. This is an honor for you. So keep going.
It is. So what episode is this?
Man, we've already had, God, it seems like, can't tell. I mean, maybe we've already had maybe like 3.
Wow.
Maybe 4. I don't. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's a big achievement to get a podcast going.
Nobody's walked off yet.
Well, no, that's good. You know, I enjoy listening to podcasts myself, and one thing I've noticed is, you know, people tend to start doing podcasts. It's like they're either at the beginning of their career or their end of their career. So
we'll find out where.
We will, won't we?
Yes. Indeed. So, okay, Bo. So let's talk a little bit about you. Let's let the audience learn a little bit about who you are. So you are from Prescott, Arizona.
That's correct. It's close. I was born in Pennsylvania,
yes,
and near Pittsburgh, and we moved to Arizona when I was 6. So pretty much, you're correct in that I grew up in Prescott, Arizona. Until you met me at when I ended up in Roswell, New Mexico, when we met up at New Mexico Military Institute.
Very good, Bo. And so your dad is a retired commercial pilot.
Yeah, that's correct. He retired in 1995, but that was one of the reasons we moved out west. Is his airline, which was U.S. Air at the time, he started coming out to Phoenix, and he really liked going out west. We had a motorhome growing up, and we would take summers and head out west, and he fell in love with Arizona, Montana, Colorado. And so once the airline started going out of there, he could commute back. He was still based out of Pittsburgh at the time. So in 1979, we moved out, and to Prescott. They had taken a trip to Phoenix and drove up to Prescott and loved the area. So they moved out there in 79, and they're both my parents are still living there today.
Excellent, Bo. And we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, but you yourself are a licensed pilot.
That's correct. I soloed an airplane when I was 16 years old, and just kind of grew up around the airport, and I learned how to fly an airplane before I got my driver's license. Actually, I soloed on a Sunday on my birthday, and the DMV opened up Monday, and so I took my license, my driver's test on the Monday. So I actually flew by myself before I was able to drive by myself.
Well, excellent. And so you also, let's see, you got shipped away, as did I, to military school. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 1990.
I
forget that.
I was in 89. I was there in 89.
Correct.
And so I kept the haircut. That from
well,
that.
Back in those days, I remember you with a full head of hair. That's how long we've known each other.
Yes, indeed. Those were the days. So we met in Captain Ray's math class.
That's right.
Remedial math class.
That's why absolutely. That's why we're lawyers.
We're juniors in Algebra 1.
Yes.
And anyway, so but you know we're used to, you know, taking a little egg on the face. That's nothing new. And so after that, you went to Embry-Riddle for your undergraduate. Talk about Embry-Riddle, because I don't know that a lot of folks are familiar with that.
Well, Embry-Riddle was, well, it still is. It's a school where you can go and either number one, you can become a pilot, or you can do a lot of things related to aviation. Like when I went, eventually my math skills got a little better, but they weren't that great. Where the Embry-Riddle has a really good engineering program. I think at the time I was there, they were number one in electrical engineering. And so we had a lot of smart people that came. We had a lot of European students that came too. But where I put my emphasis was I got a business degree there, and I focused on airline management. And so you could do the usual stuff. You could do anything with business, finance, accounting that you wanted to there, but it all had an aviation spin to it. Like we learned about airline management, we learned about union type management and that kind of stuff as well. So it was a really interesting school, and it was a really good melting pot for students because, like I said, we had a lot that came from the Far East, we had a lot that came in from Europe, and so it was a little different than a normal college setting. Unfortunately, not a lot of partying there. Embry-Riddle kind of gets made fun of as kind of a nerd school as well, but it was they've got a couple of campuses. There's one in Prescott, Arizona, and there's one in Daytona. And since Prescott was home for me, it was just basically going back home for college, which I enjoyed. But yeah, I ended up graduating there in 1997.
Okay, so and one of the other benefits about going to a place like Embry-Riddle and then moving to Texas is that you can basically make fun of the Red Raiders when they get stomped by, say like Houston Baptist or something like that. And really, because I can't turn it around on you because I can't make fun of Embry-Riddle's.
No, we were pretty bad. About the best thing we all had was we didn't, obviously they're not really any collegiate sports. About the best thing that we had was a rugby team. So that was about it.
Well, that's something. That's something. Okay. So went to Embry-Riddle, then we went to St. Mary's. Right,
that's right.
And we were together there for a little bit, and
Well, that was unplanned too. I didn't even know you were going to go, and I don't believe you knew I was going to go either. So I remember looking across at orientation when they had all the curtains opened up on the students there. I remember seeing you, and you saw me about the same time I saw you, and we were waving.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So law school at St. Mary's, and then you practiced a little bit in San Antonio, as I recall, just for a touch.
Yeah, I was working for oh boy, this brings back some memories too. It was a Atkins and O'Brien was the name of the firm, and I started clerking there about my second year, and the partner that I worked for there, he he would commute back and forth to New York, and he was the only one who had this San Antonio office going, and they weren't really funding that office there, so we were kind of he wanted to keep the practice open because he was defending the civilian contractors that worked for all the military bases there in any kind of EEOC or equal protection type case that they had. 'Cause he was a former JAG guy, attorney for the military, and he just kind of switched sides when he got out. And he really wanted to keep that practice going. And ultimately what happened was they just kept funding him less and less. So the office, it was unique, and I learned a lot of skills in this because it was unique in that we had to transition from the office building downtown San Antonio to his house.
That's what, okay.
And
that's
we
what
were
I
practicing
remember.
out of that. So.
That's what I remember about that deal is that at one point you were like, yeah, we kind of had to move back to this guy's house, and so I'm in the bedroom, in the guest bedroom, and we've got like a twin, his and her Jack and Jill bathroom.
Oh, it was funny because he was this house, he was in his 30s, and his wife and family were up in New Jersey, and so this house he had a probably 3,000 square foot house, and it was a total bachelor pad. You'd walk in, there was nothing in it. So we ultimately filled it up with all the office furniture, and we moved in there. We moved the copier in there and all that stuff, and basically it was me and another alum that Jason Clark. It was him and I basically doing the law practice for him as law students when he would commute back and forth. And we never, we didn't weren't appearing in any court or anything like that, but we were doing a lot of the drafting for him and all that. So we learned a lot early. But when I passed the bar, I was still working for him, and I believe Jason had moved on at that point, and it was just me and him. And and so I had about 6 months of that before ultimately I moved up to North Texas.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a story. I always like to joke that my very first law partner was my cat, spot. I left the DA's office. I think it was 2005, and I was working, out of my house. And at that time, I'd had some employment law experience. I had just left the DA's office, so I had some criminal law experience. And so I remember one time I got referred, kind of a big little company, and it was a big deal for me. And so I'm trying to sign the guy up and put him on retainer, and it was a big deal. And he says, "Yeah, my last lawyer was a total joke. He was working out of his house, and his printer was on top of the cat litter." And I'm like, "I think that's where my printer is. I need to go and
It's like,
I need to go and check where that thing is." So, I mean, from humble beginnings, you and I, we currently rule the universe with our law practice, and we live like kings that we're entitled to.
it's a major North Texas law firm.
That's right, and so it wasn't always like this.
No, it
Yeah.
wasn't.
So talk about the dust docket, because that was a big part of your initial career, and so I'll let you tell the viewers what the dust docket was. I don't know what's going on with it anymore, and I don't know that you do either. But go ahead.
Yeah, those were essentially, that's where I cut my teeth as a lawyer. And what the dust docket was, and still is basically it's I defended. I was on the defense side of the lawsuits, but what the lawsuits were people that had lung or breathing ailments due to either asbestos products or products that contained silicosis. And I was on the asbestos side of it. And collectively, it was called the dust docket for all the cases that were filed. And when I came up to North Texas, it was it was probably January 2001. I started working for a firm up here, and
Not in a house.
I'm sorry.
Not in a house.
No, not in the house. No, it was actually it was almost like being on an airplane though, because I flew all over the place, taking a lot of depositions. So we didn't spend a lot of time in the office back in those days. We essentially we were going to places such as like Birmingham, Alabama. We'd go off to California. We went all over Texas. Every little small town there was a factory, a power plant, anything that had any of the clients' products that we made that the plaintiff was claiming exposure to, or we may not have even been a product that was that he was exposed to or she was exposed to, but we were still in on the case and we had to attend those depositions. But when I first started, those cases were they would be filed in any jurisdiction like any other lawsuit would be. You'd have some in Houston, you'd have some in Galveston, you'd have some in Lufkin. East Texas were prime spots, South Texas were prime spots. And about 2004, the MDL was formed, which was multi-district litigation, where basically what tort reform did is they took all of those cases and they moved them from for pretrial purposes, they moved them all into one court, and that was in Harris County. And so we'd all have to go down there for basically Asbestos Friday was what it was essentially called. We'd all go down there, and any motions that were being heard in any of these cases were heard at those dockets on every Friday. So it was done in an attempt to streamline the process, and that so all the rulings would be the same. Because when you'd have evidentiary stuff over expert testimony or exposure testimony on summary judgments, it was a push to try to get everything at least under the same roof, some consistency in litigation, where in a lot of the counties they would be, depending on the judge and depending on the county, a lot of the rulings could be all over the board. And so it kind of helped our clients as to kind of minimize or at least make the strike zone at least a smaller box.
Okay, and you're watching JP Kathy and the Crew Network. You can watch JP Kathy and the Crew Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 7:30 to 9. You're watching The Lawyer Show. I'm your lawyer, Jeremy Rosenthal. We're on Thursdays at 12 to 1. Let's talk a little bit. So just so everybody understands a little bit about the asbestos type stuff. So your typical fact pattern, as I understand it, and I never got into any of these cases, but basically what you have is you have somebody who in, let's say, 2003, 2005, 2007, 1998, they develop an illness, right? Typically mesothelioma and related. Am I right on that?
Yeah, and that kind of evolved. When I first started, you would have a lot of diseases that were Uh, Asbestosis was one where it wasn't a cancer, but it would cause a restriction in breathing, and it would just be due to the scarring of the lungs from breathing in the fibers. And those are what we would call non-malignants. And what happened with the tort reform in 2004 is it cut a lot of those cases out. They had a really higher level of proof where they really had to narrow it down from the doctor's reports to say basically, hey, look, it's asbestos only, and it's not from 30 years of smoking or anything like else that could influence it, because they wanted to put the emphasis of the litigation on the more serious cases, which were the mesotheliomas, which were the cancers. And usually when the diagnosis happened, a plaintiff, if they had a mesothelioma diagnosis, they were, granted, they're all a little bit different, but generally the timeline was not very long of the lifespan that they had left at that point. And it was usually a very painful process for them. So they wanted to get those type cases front and center so those people could get relief from the products that expose them and cause the disease.
Yeah, so the person gets sick, and for whatever reason they get routed to a lawyer who specializes in something like this, and basically what they do is they go over the litany of, here's all the things that I used to work at X, Y, and Z factory, right? And they then in the 1960s and the 1970s, I don't know, as late as the 1980s maybe.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so they would, the name of the game was, or maybe still is, trying to link that individual and their illness to a potential product that they used while they were on the job 20 and 30 years ago.
Yes.
Right. And so what would happen is somebody, in a rural community, and a big part of the dust docket, and these were all really junior lawyers typically, a lot of them. And basically what happens is everybody and the whole show goes to some person's house where they're sick and dying, and all the lawyers are saying, did you use this product? Did you use this product? Did you use this product? And trying to value, it's what lawyers do, right? We're taking, the misery of humans, and we're trying to monetize it if we're any good at this. But in all seriousness, what they're trying to do is evaluate the strength of those claims. And your firm, you guys had some specific clients that were in that mix, right?
Right. And just to kind of go back a little bit on a little bit of the process is what happened was where it got, usually the biggest defendant in the early part of the litigation was Johns Manville. They had about 75% of the asbestos market, and asbestos was in a lot of things that you think it would be, such as like the stuff that would go in a boiler or furnace, pipe covering for ships, refractory stuff for boilers, and really how it really came about was World War II. The country goes into war. Everybody goes to the shipyards. Everybody starts working in the shipyards, and they're exposed to these products. And the reason why asbestos was so popular is it was light. It's a very light insulator. It did its job very well. And it wasn't the insulation itself. It would hold the insulation together. It was the binder. And so the key to the military was, okay, we can put this light insulation on there, which means we can put more armament on the ship, which means it'll be a more effective,
save fuel, carry more,
yes, it would
carry more boots.
Yes, it would have more. It could carry more people as a troop transport. It could carry more munitions if it was going to go and attack something or protect something. So, what happened was there was the latency period in those exposures, where, like you were getting to, where the reason why people would be getting sick later down the road, almost 20, 30 years, is it took that long for the disease to manifest itself. So, the fibers would get in the linings of the lungs, and if it was a mesothelioma case, and it would take a long time to cause the cancer process. But what happened was, when in about the mid 80s, Johns Manville went bankrupt. Finally, they were just getting sued from every possible angle, and so where you'd hear Johns Manville identification on the products, it started to switch to more peripherally defendants. And what one of the defendants did in about the mid to late 80s is they said, okay, we're going to put together what we call a picture book, and we're going to take it to depositions. And it showed, because they were starting to feel the heat of the exposure at the depositions, and they were like, look, there's no way that this could be all our products all the time. So we're going to put together pictures of, okay, these gaskets, for example, or this sheetrock or this joint compound you used on sheetrock, which until the late 70s, the joint compound had asbestos as well, and it is the binder. So it's in some stuff you wouldn't normally think of, like ceiling tiles or floor tiles. But they put this picture book together of all these miscellaneous products, and they would go to the depositions and start showing the plaintiff these pictures and go, "Would remember this? Did you work with this?" And it was called the outreach program.
And the answer to all those questions is yes.
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 So
yes.
what ultimately
yes.
happened is that book got attached as an exhibit at a deposition.
I mean, this sounds like a bad photo ID
It
lineup,
was.
and you know, I only went to prison for 70
Yes,
years
it
because they said, does he, you know, is this the guy, right? You know,
Yep.
which is probably not going to pass DOJ mustard anymore. But go ahead, keep
But
going.
yeah, so it was lawyers being lawyers. This book eventually got attached. So then the plaintiffs had this picture book, and so. And that still happens today where, you know, if you call the 1-800 number, you're going to get routed to a law firm. If you're sick, you're going to meet down, and they're going to kind of interview you about your work history, and they're going to interview you about stuff that you do. You know, like your home, like if you're, you know, asbestos could be in automotive gaskets. It was in automotive brakes. It was in automotive clutches, typically anything where there was friction to the household products I was talking about. A lot of, you know, the roofing stuff, the tar, a lot of that stuff through the 70s had it, sewer pipe, that kind of stuff. So they'll give you an interview of not only your work, but if you were handy around the home, like what kind of stuff you did. And then the picture book will come out, and, you know, you kind of go through there, and it would end up in their interrogatories where we'd go to a deposition, and it was like, okay, let's see his product ID list, and the product ID list would be in there. So we'd kind of have a heads up where, you know, the young lawyer would get it, and that was right. It was usually the people that could go out and travel, which based on seniority, it was always the younger men and women that were working at the firm that went, like back in my day when I went. And
it was all over the country.
It was.
Did you ever go beyond Texas?
Absolutely. I've taken depositions all over the place. One of the girls I used to work with had a map in her office and would put a tack everywhere she went, and she at least had nearly all 50, or not. Some lucky people even did get to go to some litigation in Hawaii, but I've heard of stuff as far as in Europe, depending on if you get in the corporate representatives for companies or stuff, or were a specific expert. You know, a lot of the industrial hygienists and a lot of the doctors that would be involved on both sides of the litigations, they were all over the place as well. So not only were you traveling for the plaintiffs, but you were traveling for the expert deposition.
So let's put this together. So we got a bunch of 25, 26, 27-year-old lawyers who are single, are flying all over the country, meeting at the same places, doing the same thing over and over and over again, right?
That sounds about right.
Now, this wasn't any fun, at least not for you, because you were at work and you were studying the law
very straight-laced
all the time.
You know me.
You weren't going out, hanging out, going to bars, that was not you.
Might have to take the fifth on some of that.
Okay.
No, it was a good time. I mean, it was.
And you have a lot of great stories. None of which I'm going to have you share in detail. But
what was really interesting about it is, though, a lot of times, because we were going so far, sometimes our client would have local counsel there, or like Birmingham was one of the first. Like when I started at my first law firm, I never made it into the office. You know, we had a start date, and I was up here with a colleague of mine. We were both going to start on Monday. We get a call Saturday afternoon, and it was from one of the partners, and he's like, "Hey, can you guys go to Birmingham Sunday night?" And, you know, we're brand new on this thing, and we're like, "Sure, we'd love to." He's like, "Okay, you're going to go to DFW, you're going to have a ticket, that's all going to be squared away, you're going to meet this other partner there." And, you know, and that's how we started. So I never even saw the office. I was gone for a week, and it was and at that kind of venue, they had 6 depositions going a day, probably 25 co-defendants for each deposition. So that's a lot of lawyers. And, you know, you'd have 3 plaintiffs going in the morning, and then we'd have 3 family members, which were personal representatives if they had them, going in the afternoon. And so each one of those depositions, so there's about 75 lawyers going at one time and descending on one hotel in the middle of nowhere to go do this. So one benefit of that, yeah, sure. Yes, drinks were consumed. Everybody had a good time on those trips, but I met a lot of really good lawyers as part of it as well. A lot of experience, because a lot of times when we come into an area like that, a client may have they may send two lawyers for the depositions, but they may have a local guy there, and you'd meet the local guy or girl, and they'd usually been around. They knew the venue really well, and so you could learn a lot of stuff from them and how they approached it. Because a lot of times, I was walking in the stuff having minimal knowledge about the client, the product, and so I'm learning on the fly to try to figure out how to cross-examine the plaintiff on it. Which those were kind of the early days of trying to figure out how to think on your feet in a situation like that too. So I mean, it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of the same stuff over and over again. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot about how to litigate from that.
And we've spent a lot of time on this already. You're listening to JP Kathy and the Crew Network. You can hear JP Kathy and the Crew 7:30 to 9 Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. You're watching the Lawyer Show 12 to 1 on Thursdays. Before we move on from asbestos, and this is not so much an asbestos deal, but something I've learned a lot from you is a lot about how some of these small towns, small counties, how their own little ecosystems work. Because in a lot of these asbestos cases, they brought in, they don't want to see a bunch of fancy Dallas lawyers.
Oh, absolutely.
And so talk about having local counsel at some of these smaller places, and talk about how some of that worked.
Well, I remember going out to an East Texas county one day on a summary judgment that, and I'd been probably practicing about maybe a year and a half. And so I was all fired up about it. I was going to go argue the summary judgment motion. I was going to go get my clients out of this case. I'd done all the prep work on it. I'd gone through all the depositions. I knew all the testimony that was in there. And I thought we had a really good chance to win the case on summary judgment. And I roll out there bright and early. I may have been sick at the time too, but I was all fired up and ready to go. And I get there, and plaintiff's lawyer's coming out already, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, this thing's gonna get continued." And in fact, the judge told me the hearing's gonna get continued. So I'm telling you right now, it's gonna get continued.
Right.
No motion for continuance, nothing. It was like the hearing was off, but it was like the plaintiff's lawyer was in with the judge out there, and that's how a lot of that went. And so I learned early in the game that you needed local counsel to go out there to do stuff like that, where you could always, a lot of times we had local counsel go out that would, they wouldn't even argue the motion, but they'd stand there, and by the fact they were standing with us, the judge got the picture that, like, a lot of those counties, it was like they knew their people, they trusted them. And like you said, they see a lot of suits coming in with a lot of boxes full of exhibits and stuff, and that's the last thing they want tying up their docket, because
Right.
they're, as we've learned, up here in Collin with the courts that are general jurisdiction, where they're hearing civil and criminal, the last thing they want to do is stop down the business of their people in their county that elected them for, our cases they'd clog up the court for 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes
Right.
even more. So that was the last thing they wanted to do. It wasn't so much that they wanted to just take us out. It was just that they wanted to represent their people and make sure they kept their county business going. But, and something too, I remember we were off in Milam County once, and at a time that was a real tough jurisdiction for defendants. And
Where is that?
that's Cameron, Texas.
Where's that?
It's if you go down 35, it's about 3.5 hours. It's almost
JP, Kathy, and the Crew are big there, so we're talking to a lot. Okay.
Well, good. So, okay, if you go down 35 and you go through Waco, you're going to get on 77 in Waco and head off to the southeast. And Cameron, Texas, is down there, almost by Rockport, and where a lot of almost all the litigation out of Cameron was coming from the Alcoa plant that was down there. And so we had a lot of in the late 90s, it caught fire down there, where it ended up being a good plaintiff's jurisdiction. They hit a couple of defendants for about, I think, $4.5 million, and the race was on down there. So we were defending these cases, and we ended up getting local.
So why are we doing criminal defense again?
Oh,
keep going.
Yeah, it's yeah, I know. I keep asking myself that. But so we would always get local counsel for the fact that especially when you're starting a trial on jury selection, our local counsel pretty much knew everybody down there. And, when you get a small county like that, it just helps to have that local knowledge of how it works, how the judge is, how the, just the certain nuances. And it's again, that was a big eye opener about, because as you well know, when you're in law school and what you see on TV or in the movies, is just completely different to what the real world is sometimes. Everything works great, and we all have that plan until life happens in the middle, and that was a big eye opener as to how things really worked and how hard it is. Just the steps you have to go through, and you certainly can't do some things all by yourself. You have to bring other people in.
Yeah. So let's transition here. I want to talk about at our firm, we do pretty well exclusively criminal defense, and I like to describe our office as a Swiss Army knife. We can there's really anything and everything criminal that we can handle, from the police are kicking down your door to years and years after your trial is over. We can get what's called post-conviction relief and file motions to try to overturn a years old conviction, and everything in between. One of the areas that you've kind of carved out for yourself at our office, and where you're really invaluable, is protecting somebody's professional license when they're being charged with a crime. And your background as a pilot has really helped in that regard. Talk about professional licensing as it relates to criminal charges, because we practice primarily in Collin County. We do a lot of Denton County, and in north central Texas. And the folks here, our clientele, are not. People are always surprised about, well, how can you be such a big criminal defense firm in this county, because we just don't have crime here. But a domestic assault, a DWI, theft for certain, things like this, they can really wreak havoc on a professional license, on somebody who's got something to lose just by the allegation. So
Absolutely.
Talk about that a little bit, and about your practice and yeah.
Well, it that causes a lot of stress, because anybody that has a license to do anything for for their profession, it's a lot on the line, and it's a lot more fragile than you think. It's like a good example is, let's say you're a nurse or a doctor. You're regulated by your board down, and everything kind of runs through Austin. Like us, for our law license, everything runs through Austin, and that's where any type of investigation or litigation is going to run through. What a vanilla setup is, like you alluded to, is let's say a nurse or a doctor is driving home from just going out one night to dinner and a movie, and they had a few drinks along the way, and they get pulled over for DWI, and all of a sudden that could be an issue with them on the professional license, because even though they're not on call, or even though they're not working, that could trigger an unprofessional conduct investigation into them, and these investigations come across the board. There may not be a duty for them to report anything at that point, but it may be reported to them through, if they've got an office manager for their practice and they report something to them, the office manager may report it to the board. The police officer may report it to the board. It's all different scenarios that can lead to that. And then all of a sudden you get a letter in the mail, and you're under investigation. And at that point, the worst thing I think any professional can do in that situation is try to answer the letter themselves, no matter how innocuous.
Or put their head in the sand and ignore it altogether.
That's another big one too.
Yeah.
You cannot. It's number one. It's not going away at all. There's certain deadlines that have to be met. There's certain information they're going to want, and you can't stop them. Basically, they have a duty to make sure doctors, nurses, easy example, because they have a duty to the public, and the board gets real antsy about if there's a public safety issue. They want to make sure that they're on top of it, and that a doctor's not seeing anybody that shouldn't. And where the cases really get hairy is when you're dealing with it could be prescription fraud type stuff, or if the doctor has a drug issue themselves, where they're taking it, or the nurse, or whatever. Like, again, I'm just sticking with that example because it's easier to create hypotheticals out of. But those situations get tougher with the board, where they're going to look at that person harder. But the thing is, if you stick your head in the sand, it's a bad idea, because you have certain deadlines that are going to run on you, and a lot of these investigations, where it's hard for us as lawyers, especially, like, if we if we have any kind of complaint towards us or anything, of course we want to rush right in and answer it. But the worst thing you can do is try to do it. You need a neutral advocate for you that's just going to be able to unemotionally get them the information they want. Because typically what will happen is there's going to be a letter of an investigation. You're going to have a time to do a quick rebuttal, which may, we want to know about this, this, and this. So you respond to it. And then they're going to determine whether they want to go any further on it. And I've had situations where it's died right with a letter back, or I've had situations where it's gone on and ultimately led to a hearing in Austin. So if you take the long road, basically it turns into a situation where they're going to want a longer response from you. And then what I've been able to do in one recent situation was we were able to basically put evidence forward that the client had a alcohol monitoring device on the car, which we had good records from and good proof from. So we were able to put that in for the hearing that showed that they were complying with probation. That at the time they were arrested for the DWI, they were not on call, they were not anywhere near work, and that it was a very remote in time issue. It was basically a good person on a really bad day. And and the reviews that the doctor had through the medical website, we used those in our favor too. The person had a lot of great reviews, and so we were able to kind of put that in there to paint a picture. And ultimately, when you're going that far in investigation, there's going to be a hearing, and it's typically before a 3-panel board, and you're probably going to have 2 members of your profession on the board, and then maybe someone that's close to the board but may not be part of the profession, that's hearing your case. And that's the time for the professional to basically, I set the table for them on a hearing like that, but it's their time to shine. And it's the time to, there's always an element of being contrite, and no matter what the situation is, it's like, okay, here's what happened, here's my version of why we were in that situation, but more importantly, here's what I've done since then, and ultimately here's how I made changes. If that's the scenario, every scenario is different, but at that point, like in that last situation that I was describing for you, we did very well at the board, and they ultimately dismissed the case there. So sometimes it does, even if you're, I guess my point is, even if you're having to take the long way around the mountain, it's a good idea to have representation through that all, if not the best idea to have. And that even though you are taking the long road, that doesn't mean that it's going to end badly for you.
You're watching JP, Kathy, and the Crew network. You can watch JP, Kathy, and the Crew between 7:30 and 9 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're watching The Lawyer Show. We're on between noon and 1. I'm your lawyer, Jeremy Rosenthal. Okay, to kind of set the stage for folks and kind of give people a big picture of sort of the problems that you and I deal with, the problems that our clients have, I find that if I had to put a number on what I would characterize as mental illness with our clients, I would put the number between 60-70%. That's unscientific, but and I would also broaden the definition, or most people's definition, of what it means to be mentally ill, because a lot of times we think that that's somebody who's talking to themselves. We think that that's somebody who has active psychosis, and it really may not be. It may be enhanced anxiety. It may be depression. It may be certain things, and most folks, their range of whatever's going on in their lives, instability is in here, and our clients may just be out there. And what happens to them could be a function of a manic episode or a really hard time that they're going through in their lives. And what I'm trying to get to is that, of all the people that we've represented, I can say that, and I've said this before, I really strongly feel like the people who just suck are very, very, very minimal. When we have a professional who comes to our office, we see them all. We see physicians, we see attorneys, we see very, very smart, accomplished people, and and what their professional licensing agencies are trying to grapple with is this person safe to be a doctor?
Right.
Is this person safe to be a nurse? Can this person functionally do this? And so, and a lot of times it's just sort of common sense as to what they're interested in. Somebody will come into the office and they'll feel horrible about being arrested for a DWI, and they walk around the earth thinking everybody is staring at them all day, every day, which we know isn't the case. And they'll be worried about their job, and so so we ask them, do you drive the volleyball team from game to game? No. Okay, well, that's fine. Are you a pilot? Because it's a big deal if you're a pilot. If you're a CPA, it's really not that fatal. If you're a lawyer, in some ways, it kind of enhances your reputation. Maybe, I don't know. That's probably not very funny, but but for transportation related stuff, that type of stuff can be very, very. They really scrutinize it. For the nurse, they want to make sure she's not in the medicine cabinet.
Right.
And so really, when you can talk to a professional board, in Austin, and you can make the big picture make sense to them, it typically always does.
Right.
Or it does when you approach it that way. Now, we also have the nuance that we're also defending a criminal case here too, right?
Yes.
So, and it's very hard when you have a client who does have problems, who has gotten themselves in a situation, but we're not guilty of this, and we're not going to take the conviction. And so you're kind of fighting that on two fronts, and that just takes a lot of balance.
Well, exactly. And, my experience with the professional boards, when they're investigating someone, they're going to get everything. You need to be upfront, and you need to, or a lot of times you're doing the reverse in a criminal case. You may not be talking. You're obviously not meeting with investigators in 99.9% out of all the cases. But with the board is going to be, the investigator for the board is going to be able to gain access to all the information, i.e. they're going to be able to get in there and get that police report. If it's a DWI, they're going to get in there and get that blood test result. They'll know if there's an open container in the car. They're going to go through all of that. If it's assault, family violence, or something like that, they're going to go and have access to all those witness statements. So there's nothing, and that's where, in your initial rebuttal to them, that's why it's so important, I think, to have counsel review the big picture of everything that's going on. And that's where, and also for the professional to be upfront with the counsel that they're discussing things with, because how you answer that, like if you're in a DWI situation, you had a car accident, but you don't mention the car accident to the lawyer that's representing you in a professional action, and you just say, hey, in your response, the counsel's response back is, well, this was a vanilla DWI, for lack of a better word. It was just a pullover out of a traffic stop. They're going to find out there was an accident, and you'll be accused of misleading the board. So and that will be a strike against you, because now not only does it look like, okay, this person may have a problem with a substance, alcohol or drugs, but it looks like the moral turpitude is not there, where they're not, even after that arrest, they're not being forthright with this. I've heard of experiences where a person was I believe it was a doctor, was applying for reapplying for privileges at a hospital, and it's just because a doctor's a doctor does not mean they get to walk in any hospital and start performing surgery. They have to qualify for the privileges at that hospital. And so this doctor was on review for every how many years or whatever they have to renew privileges, but they were on review, and in the interim period between the two review periods, they picked up a DWI. It had been reduced to an obstruction. And the question was, I think it was something to the regards of, have you ever been arrested or anything like that? I can't remember exactly how they phrased the question, how it was relayed to me, but they said no. And so what the hospital directors did, and like the chief of surgery is on those reviews, and they're board within the hospital, and they looked and they said, well, wait a minute, we had a case in, I think, Tarrant County or whatnot. And so even though he was in good standing, they all liked him. Because that disclosure was not accurate, they didn't allow privileges I think they suspended privileges for like 6 months or something. So anything like that, where it may seem innocuous, or you may not understand the legal terminology, it can bite you in the professional world. And that was a little bit off the the professional, having a full blown investigation or board hearing, but that's how it can affect you in different ways. So,
and that's the and I tell clients this too. Your professional license, more often than not, in a criminal case, that's the Alamo.
absolutely,
That's what we have to defend.
Yep.
I love, I'm not worried in a lot of cases about you going to jail, and I'm not worried about how this is going to look in 10 years. I'm worried about you putting food on the table.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times we just always have to be kind of cognizant of that flank. And to your point, a lot of times the cover up is worse than the crime.
Absolutely.
And so before we, I do, a lot of the Bo Kalabus fans that are out there,
maybe one or.
I got people want to know about your flying, and they want to know about being a pilot, and I'm gonna brag on you for 1 second, if I can. Bo saves lives in the courtroom. Bo's actually saved a life in an aviation setting. Bo actually pulled some people out of a plane that had crashed in Oklahoma. I'll let you tell the story here in a minute. And if I'm wrong, don't correct me if I'm making you out too good. But not only that, you've been in you were in the stands at the Reno Air Races, and there was a very nasty crash 200 yards from you. This is more than a hobby. So I guess in the context of the Lawyer Show, talk about how important it is to have an outlet, and then talk about flying, and then I'm going to have you evaluate which is the best airport movie of all of them. So start where you want.
Flying's always it's always been a big part of my life. It's been a passion. Like you said earlier, I grew up in a pilot family. My dad was a pilot, and when and he built his own airplane. It's called a Christian Eagle biplane, which I now currently own. And so I grew up around him and his buddies working on that airplane, all through the late 70s and 80s. And I grew up at the airport, which was a fun place for being a kid. We'd get out there, and you learned how to ride a motorcycle. You could just kind of hang. We would do stuff like that. Learn how to drive when you were underage. I think the statute of limitations is run on that already. But it was
this feeds into the whole going to military school thing.
It was. I learned too many skills too early, I think. So, but no, it was a good time. It was hanging around him and his friends, and so it was just great exposure as a kid. So when I finally got the means where I could start back flying again after I settled, I took a long absence where I didn't fly. Obviously, when you're going to school and trying to get your career going and that. But in the early 2000s, I started back, and I got really serious around 2007, 2008. I bought a Cessna 140, and me and my wife just kind of flew that all over the country and went to air shows.
I'm pretty sure you did all the flying.
I did all the flying. No, Corey's my talented better half, and she's definitely the better half. But no, she doesn't want to learn how to fly, but she likes to go. So it's kind of a counterculture where, especially in Texas, there's a lot of grass field airstrips around, and a lot of times we have fly in, where you fly in, you set up a tent, everybody just kind of camps out, hangs out. It's kind of a fun experience. And then when I started,
well, I need to stop you on that, because I've invited myself to some of these big things, and I said, "Hey, Bo, let's go. You're going to wherever, right? I don't know,
going to Critters Lodge,
right there, there." And I'm like, "This sounds like fun. We're gonna go drink beer. I'm gonna go hang out this weekend." And then you've told me, "No, we can't do that." And you said you're not going to like that because the talk is not going to be all about you. And so because when you guys nerd out on airplanes, and
it is nerding out.
It's like And so I'm over my head. But anyway, I stopped you too early. Keep going about.
Well, it's when I started flying the Eagle, which it's an aerobatic biplane. It's got a lot of horsepower to weight ratio, and it's a challenge to fly. And what I like about flying is it's something I can do away from the office that requires all my attention. And so I call it my version of yoga, because basically I can just get in that thing and I have to focus on it or it's going to kill you. That's just the general rule. You have to put everything else out of your mind, and you have to pay attention. You have to do what you do. And it's a challenge, and I like to be challenged that way. flying that airplane led to me getting into aerobatics, which, people call them stunts, but we call them precision aerobatic maneuvers. And that led to eventually me going and getting more training on how to do that. And then in the last couple of years, I've competed in the aerobatic competitions that it's through the International Aerobatic Competition section, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm not very good. I'm in one of the lower categories, but it's a great release, and I like to get out there and do it, and it's just fun.
That's great advertisement, by the way, for me to go and fly with you. I'm not very.
No, I'm not good at the aerobatics. It's just I'm not like, as far as a competitor, it's like I'm getting there. I'm trying to get there, but it's like I said, it's a challenge, and I'm safe. That would be a better word. But,
No, well, and I'll say this, you are meticulous and you bring it to your law practice. You are extremely detail oriented, and I have to think that some of that comes from flying.
I think it does. I mean, I'm real meticulous about the airplane care. I like everything straightened up in the hangar, but yes, I like everything. When you go out there, you want to get everything as perfect as you can, and it's always a process. You want to try to get that perfect flight or that perfect aerobatic sequence, and it's really hard to do. And that's what I like about it. It's demanding, and I I do carry that into my law practice, and it's certain traits that we have that I think it's hard to turn a trait off just because you're doing something else. And
Mm-hmm.
It's with the practice, it's like anything else. It keeps you up, and you want to try to find a better way or a better way to put something, or boy, have I missed something, and let's just tear back through it again. And I think that carries over.
JP Kathy and the Crew Network. You can watch JP Kathy and the Crew between 7:30 and 9 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're watching The Lawyer Show. We're on between 12 and 1. I'm Jeremy Rosenthal, your host. Okay, so you kind of did a lawyer trick. We were talking about you saving people from an airplane, and I noticed that you never talked about that in your answer. So I'm going to object to the non-responsive nature of your answer. So go ahead and tell the story.
Well, okay, so here we go. This was back about 2014, and I was telling you about the grass fields we'd fly into. There's a great one up on Lake Texoma, and it's called Cedar Mills, and you fly in there. They've got a great grass runway. You fly in there, and you walk a short distance over to the marina. And I was meeting a buddy up there, and we were just going to do breakfast, and it was funny because he was on call for his work, and I was moving and packing, and I promised Tori she wasn't going with me that day. I would just be like just up there and back, a little stress release, and we'll be good. And so we get up there and we have breakfast and we're heading back and everything's good. And there's an airplane landing and I see him touch down, and all of a sudden the airplane turns about 90 degrees on the runway. It's still moving fairly quickly, but then he catches a tree with one of the wingtips and it cartwheels him into some pretty hardwood trees. They've got some big trees up there, and I had told my buddy, I was like, call 911, and I started running towards the airplane. And as I'm about halfway there, and I see a girl, and she's staggering down the runway coming towards me, and I could tell she broke her arm or shoulder. Something was not pointed the way it should have been. And she's like, my boyfriend's in there, and he's dead. And I'm like, oh, great. So I sat her down, and I said, look, I'll be back to you in a second. She was obviously in shock. She had, I could see a lump coming from her head, but I was just like, look, just have a seat. And so then I ran to the airplane, and I saw a couple, an older couple, and then her boyfriend was in like the co-pilot's seat, and I could see that he was knocked out, and he was moaning, and I could tell that the arm was broken really bad. It was pretty much compound, but the bone hadn't come through the skin yet. And so I'm like, he's got an airway, so I don't want to move him because I just don't know what else is going on. And kind of the thing we do whenever there's an accident, you want to make sure the switch is off, or if you're going into an emergency, it's the main battery switch that powers everything in the airplane. So we got that turned off. The pilot everybody had it was a sideways accident where the airplane was moving sideways when it hit the tree, and everybody's head hit each other. Like, because you have shoulder harnesses on, but in a sideload accident like that, it didn't really help because everybody kind of banged heads and went to the side. And so everybody was kind of stars around their head, and they were pretty bloody at the time. But then But they were going to be fine. I kind of assessed everybody, and then I get, I didn't want to move the kid, and then I looked down, and it's funny when you're in a situation like that, and you just kind of you miss a lot of stuff, and you're not thinking really clearly either. I remember I was pretty wound up, and I looked down, and I'm standing in fuel, and I'm like, I got to get him out of there now, because I could see now underneath. As I see the bigger picture, I see fuel is starting to come underneath the airplane now. I didn't think to turn the fuel off. This was how I was thinking there. That was the one thing I did bad. I should have gone for the fuel valve. I wasn't sure if the plumbing was breached anyway with it. So I went and I grabbed that kid, and with the help of the pilot, because I tried to move him myself, and he was a skinny kid, but I couldn't lift him. And at that point, I realized, wow, I better get back to the gym. And so I took the other guy, and we ended up getting him out, and we drug him free, and and then luckily the volunteer fire department came at that point, so I was just like, phew. But no, I didn't save him, but
Well,
we got it. We did what we could.
what did the guy say when he got your bill in the mail?
Oh no, everybody did live after that though. Everybody did good. They care flighted them out of there, but they were fine in the long run. So I've touched base with the girl that I saw, she touched base with me later to let me know that he was fine. So it ended up being good.
We got 3 minutes left. We haven't covered NMMI. We haven't covered movies.
Huh.
So let's do this, because movies are very important in our office.
Well, but I think you're going to look back, and I think you're going to, in the history of this podcast, I think you're going to, when you look back, 5 years from now, you're going to see that this is the episode that brought you to the top. I think that started
There's
your way
not
up.
a question. There's not a question about that. Airport 70 or Airport 77?
Airport 70, of course. That's
With George
such a
Kennedy?
classic. George Kennedy, Dean Martin. I mean, come on.
Was
Yeah.
that what happened in that one? Was that the one?
That's the one with the bomb.
The guy brought the bomb on the plane.
77's just too hokey, but you got Jack Lemmon in there, and the airplane's sinking, and then them floating the airplane again.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that was dumb.
Yeah, that's But I mean, there was one with the Concorde. I mean, they got progressively worse.
Well, we got in our office, the Coen brothers are big.
Oh yeah,
Burn After Reading.
Serious Man.
A Serious Man, that's a big one. You have not watched. You're a big Stanley Kubrick fan, which I find hard to believe, because you've never watched A Clockwork Orange.
I know, this is embarrassing. I've never seen it. I don't really have a good.
It's
excuse.
about criminal justice.
I don't have a good excuse. I
mean,
know.
it got banned in the UK for 10 years. Anything that happens to, man, is worth at least watching from like a traffic accident standpoint. And just watching.
If I'm ever on this again, next time I will have watched it, and I will have an extensive review for this 3-minute period. How about that?
Well, I've been asking you for like 5 years. It's been longer than that on A Clockwork Orange.
Just some things you can't give up.
Okay.
You gotta hang in there.
But in our office, 13 Days, another movie that we can quote a lot from.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I can tell you, I feel like we caught, well, we've got to keep this clean. JFK is another big one.
Oh, of course.
And Kevin Bacon describing what? Oh, the movie, The Office, the TV show. Well, yeah. Oh, the movie Office Space.
Yeah, Office Space.
Office Space. Yes, we take some of our acronyms directly from some movies. Like in Office Space, they have TPS reports, and
yes.
The hard thing with working on the hard part about acronyms is making them make sense. And so I'm going to tell one quick story, and then I think we're out of time about acronyms. So Judge John Roach has a program called Valor. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. It's about veterans who are in the there goes my timer, in the criminal justice system, and I'm talking to him about it, and he's telling me of all the details about it, and he's done a lot of amazing work. And I said, Judge, how hard was it to come up with that acronym? And he's, oh my God, that was the hardest thing. It took us forever to come up with that, but he nailed it. So, and the hard part too with a good acronym is you need some vowels. You got to work in the vowels in there some way.
But he's a hard worker, so.
That he is. And so anyway, and our audience needs to get back to their day. They've enjoyed us for lunch. You've been watching The Lawyer Show on JP, Kathy, and the Crew Network. You can watch them between 7:30 and 9, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can join us again next Thursday at noon with The Lawyer Show with Jeremy Rosenthal. Thank you.